Brings it up. Hi, I'm Kelly Tobin. I work for Bird Conservancy of the Rockies in partnership with Tomorrow's Water. I'm the Playa and Water Conservation Outreach Specialist, and I work out of the Fort Collins office, but I cover the Eastern Plains over the Ogallala Aquifer. All right, now that it's here, let's see. No. Oh, yay, okay. So a little bit about Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, if you're not familiar. We kind of take a three-pronged approach to bird conservation through science. So we have bird monitoring programs, both breeding and non-breeding birds throughout their migration route. We have a stewardship team, which is what I am a part of. So we work with a lot of private landowners to do conservation work throughout the high plains. And then we also have an education team. We have bird summer camps and a lot of outreach programs with schools. And so we want to kind of take those three prongs to advance bird conservation throughout, especially grassland habitats. Yay. So, as part of that, Bird Conservancy has a lot of different partnerships. We have a lot of biologists who work with NRCS. We work with state agencies. And so I am part of the Tomorrow's Water team, and I'll tell you a little bit about what Tomorrow's Water does. I also have some colleagues here that I will point out at the end to talk a little bit more. So how did we get here? We've talked a little bit about the Ogallala already, and so we kind of know where we are with the Ogallala. So we're seeing declining levels region-wide, and I think Joel's graphs really showed what that looks like. Municipal wells, all of our wells are under increasing pressure. We have to go deeper, and the pressure is not as high. Cost of infrastructure, cost of everything are continuing to rise. Ag-driven economies depend on water availability. Water is deeply tied to the land and the value of land out here. And we need water to keep those communities alive. Without water, you know, we've talked a little bit about buy and dry. Without water, communities cannot thrive. And so we want to keep water in communities. And so that brings us to Playas. Just wondering here to get a sense of how familiar folks are. How many people know what Playas are? They're called like buffalo wallows. Yeah, great. So Playas are small temporary wetlands. They're mostly on private land. Not all of them, but most of them are. They are found throughout the high plains. So this is a really good picture. Texas is kind of like the darling of what playas look like because they have so many and they're so beautiful. But we have a bunch of playas here that are full. So they're a primary source of recharge for the Ogallala Aquifer. And I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like and how that happens. They filter and clean water as it travels to the aquifer. So not only is it adding water to the aquifer, it's adding higher quality water. And they're really important migration stopover sites and important wildlife habitat. We are in a very arid area. There isn't always water running. And so playas are often that like really important source of water, especially during migration times. And so we kind of define playas can be healthy or unhealthy. And so a healthy playa has an intact clay basin. So what makes a playa as opposed to a different type of wetland is that it's rain fed. I'll just go through all these. It's rain fed, so it's not groundwater fed. It's not connected to any other lakes, springs, seeps, anything like that. And it has that intact clay basin. And the clay basin is what makes it a really good source of recharge. Because if you think of clay, versus other types of soil, it has these big cracks in it that allow water to go down. Once again, I'll show you. But that clay basin, when it dries, allows water to go through and then eventually will soften as water is added. And that's when you see that ponding start to happen, when those cracks fill because the clay is softening. There aren't any modifications to a healthy playa, so there aren't any pits dug out. There's not sediment on top of it. It hasn't been farmed through. And then it has to have some type of native grass buffer that traps sediment while water is coming in. And so sediment can have all sorts of things, nitrogen, different types of fertilizer, things like that, that get caught in soil. But if you have that native buffer, that water will get cleaned as it goes through the grass. And then playas, it's really critical that they go through both wet and dry cycles. So even when a playa is dry, which is what we'll be seeing today, they're still working. You need them to fully dry out to be able to function as a source of recharge. And so Colorado playas, to get a little bit more specific, so there are over 80,000 over the aquifer. 8,000 of those, or about 8,000 of those, are here in Colorado. The average size is 5.6 acres. They can be smaller, they can be larger, but on average, they're about 6 acres. They are dry much more often than they are wet. And it's very dependent on local precipitation. I know there are some areas over the aquifer where they fill in, every summer or every spring. That is not always the case here in Colorado. So they are dry more often than they're wet. And once again, that means they're still working. And here in Kit Carson County, playas are wet about 5 to 20% of the time. So really don't expect them to be wet. They're beautiful when they are, but they're still really functional even when they're not. And then this example up top here is a playa that on one side is rangeland and on one side has been restored. And so the modification here is a road going through it. So playas have a whole bunch of functions that are really important. I'm going to focus on the top three up here, but I just wanted to point out floodwater storage. So they are naturally occurring at the lowest point in like a local watershed. So when rain is falling, all of the water will fall and eventually go into that playa. And so during flooding events, the playa kind of acts as a natural area for the water to sit, and get captured, kind of like a rain barrel. Because of the moisture in the soil and the grass buffer, they provide really good livestock forage. They're a great part to be kind of part of a managed grazing plan. And then there's a lot of opportunity for recreation, especially hunting, and education to learn about these standalone biodiversity hotspots. So focusing in first on that biodiversity piece, playas support a whole bunch of wildlife. They become these oases in the plains. So over 185 bird species use playas. We are on what's called the Central Migratory Flyway, which is a major migratory route through North America from Canada to Mexico and back, and down even into Central America for some birds. So over 185 bird species use playas, and dozens of those are game species. So if you're a hunter and you like geese, pintails, teals of different kinds, all of them use playas. Over 450 plant species, so a lot of native plant species out here rely on the water and the soils that playas have. 13 amphibian species. We wouldn't have amphibians out here without playas. They really rely on that water that comes out and kind of covers the landscape because we have a lot of playas out here. And 37 mammal species. So we have a lot of different animals and plant species that depend on playas, and they can become this really biodiverse, beautiful part of the plains. The big part that I want to talk about today, because we're at the water conference, is the role of playas in aquifer recharge and water filtration. That's really where they shine. So this is how playas work. So if we're looking at a typical agricultural landscape, you might have this depression. It'll kind of look like a bowl in the middle of the field. And if you come on the Playa field tour, we'll show you how to look for them. So you can see here that basin, and I'll kind of zoom in as well, but that basin right here, water is filtering in through the cracks that form in the playa. So when you have that clay basin dry, these big cracks form. You can see water filtering down in some of those, and then water filtering down below that. If you have sediment on top of that, that makes it less efficient at filtering. We have wells going down into the aquifer, and then you also have that recharge. And so recharge is happening all over the high plains, but playas are very, very good at filtering and recharging the aquifer. So kind of zooming in on an individual playa, we have this clay basin here, that clay layer. You'll see the rest of the landscape kind of go down into that bowl. And especially this is very clear when there's not water in it. You'll be standing in it and you can see kind of sloping up on the sides of the playa. Eventually, once those cracks fill, because water has kind of sealed that clay, the water will start to pond on top. And then we can see here rain and runoff are feeding into that playa because it is the lowest point in the landscape. So there are a lot of ways that water is recharging through the playa. But the main kind of takeaway is that they are very, very good at recharging. And we have the issue of we are pulling a lot of water out of the aquifer. And so how do we get more into it? And this is kind of the best way to do it. So playas, like I said, are a primary source of recharge. This is a map of the high plains. The red outline is the Ogallala Aquifer, and then all of those blue spots are playa lakes. A lot of them, we call them playa complexes. The highest density is in the panhandle of Texas, but all those blue dots are individual playas, and then especially in Texas, lots of little playas making up big playa complexes. So they contribute up to 95% of the water flowing to the aquifer. Playas are a primary source of recharge. Recharge rates in playas compared to upland areas with different soil types, the big thing is that soil type, recharge rates are 10 to 1,000 times higher in playas than upland areas. And the average recharge rate is 3 inches per year moving towards the aquifer. And so what that means is if you have a 4-acre playa and you have it pond, 3 inches of that water across all 4 acres are moving down. So it's not just, 3 inches in one part of the playa, but it's across that whole basin. However, over 80% of playas have been modified. And so a lot of playas that you see don't look like my beautiful pictures from Abe that have, tons of smartweed growing and water on top. A lot of them look more like this, but they still stand out from the landscape. They still look either a little bit wetter or they might have different plants growing, but they don't look quite like what I was showing you before. And so we have examples of modified playas here. And the major modifications that we see are roads being built through them. I-70 was built through a bunch of playas. So when you're driving home, take a look, you'll probably see some. A lot of sediment also comes in from surrounding crop fields. So if you're farming your playa or the area around your playa is farmed and you don't have that grass buffer, then sediment is just going into it because there's nothing there to capture it. Another one is pitting. So this is an example of a healthy playa down here that has a buffer, but then here you can see this circle is still a playa, but the water is really only pooling in one area. And that's because people might put pits in there for cattle to get access to water or for a variety of different reasons. And then the other is not having that buffer. These guys are healthy. They've been enrolled in, I assume CRP, but they're in a crop field, and then that buffer was put around the playas. And so these playas can function and are quite healthy. So tomorrow's water is looking to address this declining water supply with playas. So to do so, we need to restore playas and adopt practices that reduce aquifer overuse. I think Joel said it, recharge and kind of changing practices in irrigation. We just cannot make up for current rates of irrigation with playa recharge. They can recharge rain-fed systems, so dry land, grazing operations, and municipalities and households. So the town of Burlington could be supported by playa recharge, but irrigation around the region could not be supported by playas. And then the other thing to remember is that healthy playas with buffers improve water quality. There have been issues with nitrates in especially a lot of different areas around here, and playas can help filter those out. So tomorrow's water is a multi-state collaborative initiative. So I wanna say hello to Bernadette and Abe right back there. They work on our Kansas team. So folks who are in Kansas, feel free to reach out to them. But we respond to every community's needs. So every community is different. What are you farming? How much precipitation do you get? How big is the community? There are a bunch of different factors that go into it. But we want to incorporate Playas somehow into water planning efforts. So we want to help with reduction in aquifer overuse, restoring Playas, and then managing runoff within Playa watersheds. So can we make sure that water is going into the Playa, and can we make sure that that runoff is being like cleaned and filtered through buffers? And then we connect producers with Playa restoration assistance programs. So this could be different NRCS programs. This could be different planning operation or different programs through the state, depending on what your goals as a producer are, depending on what's available and how you can kind of pair it with other things on your operation. And then same with working with communities more at the municipal level. You know, how can we talk about Playas? How can we raise more awareness about them? And how can we get them into kind of broader water planning efforts? So our approach is community driven. Like I said, we work with each community individually. It's partnership based. So like Daryl said, partnerships are really important. We work with a lot of different nonprofits, federal and state governments, different initiatives across the region. It's voluntary every step of the way. We want communities to give input and say what they do and do not want, what makes sense with their goals and what does not. And like I said, tailored to local needs. So this could look like identifying community water conservation goals. Are there limits that you are trying to hit? What water planning work has already been done? We want to assess playa conditions. What are the modifications that we're seeing? How big are playas? Do we have playa complexes? What are the restoration opportunities? Are there roads through them? Is there sediment coming in? Things like that. Integrating playas into long-term water planning efforts. So as we think into the future, as Colorado plans for our water future, how are we able to integrate playas as part of that? They haven't really been a big part of Colorado's water planning. And so part of my role and part of the role of Tomorrow's Water is to get playas in front of more people as a solution to aquifer overuse. And then fund and implement playa restoration projects over the aquifer. So that's a big part of what we're doing. And as folks find playas on their land, we want to help support, you know, can we take these out of production? Can we add a grass buffer around them? You know, can we level out these pits? And so the cool thing about playas is that because we know where a lot of them are, we don't know where all of them are, but we can estimate, okay, how much water can we get from playa restoration? And so that is Burlington up there. And just to orient you to this map, the colors kind of are a gradient into how much drinking water could we provide if we restored all the playas that are over 1.2 acres in this, and each box is by county. And so the lighter colors are 0 to 20%, and then going to 100%. Kit Carson County can get 100% of drinking water needs met if all playas over 1.2 acres are restored. And so once again, that's municipal. That's like the town of Burlington and the people who live here. That's not irrigation, but that is enough to provide drinking water and water for households for all of Kit Carson County and all of Burlington if we were to restore all those playas. And in Kit Carson County alone, there are over 650 playas. There are quite a lot. And so this is a map of the 10-mile radius around Burlington. There are 1,438 playa acres within 10 miles, and that's about 252 playas. 180 of those playas potentially need restoration. They've been modified in some way. But if we were to restore all of those, we could get 360 acre feet of recharge, which is, I wrote it down, over 117 million gallons of water, which if we're also thinking like not in acre feet, but in terms of football fields, which is like a very American, like anything but the metric system, it's 273 football fields covered in a foot of water. So we could do a lot and support the Ogallala a lot here in Burlington by restoring playas. And so the next step as we look forward into working here in Burlington, working in different parts of the state, is determine how Playas can fit into these longer term planning efforts. How can they make a meaningful contribution, and how can they support communities to keep folks out here on the landscape, to keep that rural way of life going? How can we make sure that there's water for the future, that there's water for tomorrow? So we can help determine what that might look like, kind of brainstorm. It looks very different in every community. As we've met, our team is 9 people across 5 states. What we are doing and what we talk about in those meetings, every community is different. So every community's solutions look a little bit different, and the ways that folks want to engage with this looks different. But the main thing is getting Playas out there and getting Playas to be a part of those longer term planning efforts. We have a lot of resources. So there are a lot of restoration solutions. I kind of went through the 4 biggies. So planting that native vegetation buffer, filling drainage features so the playa fills equally across its whole basin, removing accumulated sediment. The sediment makes it harder for the clay to do its job, so you don't want sediment on top. And you want to redirect water back into the playa. So if there have been berms, culverts, roads, different things like that, how can we kind of modify those? Can we make adjustments to redirect water back into that playa so it's not draining into a culvert, or it's not draining into a pit over here, it's going into the playa where it can go back into the aquifer. There are a lot of tools available, and that QR code will take you to this page. Playa Lakes Joint Venture has put together a lot of resources. You do not have to kind of figure out this on your own. You can work with myself, and you can look kind of a little bit at like, oh, what is that in my backyard? Is that, or on my field? What am I looking at? There's a interactive playa map, this top one. So that shows all of the probable playas that we know of based on some different data sources. So you can take a look and play my favorite game, Is That a Playa? There's also a playa restoration guide, which will walk you through some of the potential solutions for making your playa get it back to a healthy state. There's also on the bottom here, a playa land use calculator, where you can just input how much are you spending on irrigation, what are you spending on seed, what are you spending on the playa that you are either farming or ranching, and what would it cost if you didn't farm or ranch it? What would it cost if you enrolled it in a different program? What would that look like on your specific operation? And so that's a really great tool as well. There are also recharge and wetness estimators. So you can see for this specific playa, how much water could this provide? Do we think it's worth it? And so we can really get into the details of planning for your operation or planning for your community. So with that, I recommend we put our playas to work. We have, like I said, 8,000 in Colorado and 80,000 throughout the Ogallala region. We can put our playas to work to get water back in the aquifer, to meet operational goals, to provide important wildlife habitat, and make sure that water's in it for future generations so we can stay out here as well. And so like Daryl said, we have Playa Field Days. Not tomorrow, it's today. And then Thursday, June 25th in Phillips County, probably Holyoke. But that is my contact information. Like I said, I am with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies in partnership with Tomorrow's Water. So you can go to either website. Feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to chat playas. And if you are not in Colorado and want to get in touch with one of my colleagues, I am happy to do that as well. But thank you so much. Yeah. Great question. So the question was, what are the barriers to actually getting playa restoration done? And I would say the big one out here is that a lot of folks don't know what playas are. And if they do, they don't know their importance for recharge. It might be like, oh yeah, that's a playa lake, but not quite knowing how valuable they are for aquifer recharge. And then another one is just getting enrolled in the different programs that are available and making it financially feasible. Yeah, so we can put folks in contact with we can kind of go through like, okay, here are the options, what makes sense? You know, are you interested in easement? Are you not interested in easement? Do you want something longer term, shorter term? So we can kind of help narrow that down. And yeah, it'll look a little bit different, especially state to state, but here in Colorado, yeah.
Yeah. Any guesses how they were originally?
I don't know. Abe, you're looking like you might know, but I think it's kind of like our best guess. We don't exactly know.
Oils or water? Could be water or both.
Do we know, Abe? When yeah, and the prairie pothole region, which is even farther north in the you know, high plains, grasslands area, those were formed by glacial deposits and like glacial movement, but playas are like different. And so that is what distinguishes a prairie pothole is how they were formed in that clay basin. But we don't really know. Well, mm-hmm. Those I do not believe are on the map because we're looking at freshwater playas. So playas by this definition are those freshwater systems. There are things called saline playas and they're all over. We have them a lot in like the San Luis Valley too here. But that is not what we have mapped because that wouldn't be great for drinking water. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, it looks like you guys have some amazing like figuring out or already know like where the flies are. Have you guys done any owner outreach, like identify the owners have land where their flies present for those flies?
That is what I am doing. That's my job. So yes, I will be reaching out to folks kind of based on that map. And that map is our best estimate. But if you or someone you know has a spot that isn't on that map and you're like, this looks like it still could be a playa, still reach out because some of those might not have been mapped. It is our best guess. They're ephemeral. It's hard to tell sometimes. Um, but yes, so one of my roles will be reaching out to folks, especially with those complexes. So playas really work well when there are a bunch kind of supporting each other. You get more recharge. It's better for wildlife habitat because they don't have to go as far. And so I'm also identifying, okay, where are those complexes and who are landowners who might have a bunch of them that we can restore together.
Very cool. I think well we've talked about it already, but I think in Colorado the regional park that
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah. Abe. What a good question. So the question was, are there other municipalities that have already kind of started to do this? So yes, they're not in Colorado. But Clovis, New Mexico is a really great example. They purchased land around the city of Clovis that has playas on it specifically to help stabilize and kind of plan for their water future. And so they put playas into the language for their water planning. And there are some towns in Texas that are working in it. We have some towns in Kansas. I know Goodland is working with Bernadette. And so we do have towns that are already working in it. Kansas and Texas have really been leaders with playa work. And so we are kind of building off what has been done in Texas and Kansas. Kansas is slaying. Yes. Mm-hmm.
it basically came up to 3 acre feet off one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, Burlington was a quick fix.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We talked about that.
it has to be kind of a collaborative piece. So playas are really important for that municipal piece, but yes, if we are still irrigating at the same rate, then we're still taking the same amount of water out. So it has to be in conjunction. So both are good. We want both. Yeah. Or, some of the examples that have been discussed, like Darren mentioned, 12 versus 14 inches of irrigation, or timing it. So you're putting less water on the landscape, but still getting those outcomes. So it's just creative ways to use the water that we have, and reduce the pressure on the aquifer. Yes.
All the components. They are certain. Correct. The other question about conservation funding, so how do we do this if we want to do fire? We're not always readily available. Paperwork to get through that. Maybe hurdles and not. Creative funding. In general, I think the idea starting with organization really excited about this. A lot of it. So I encourage you to visit the website.
Yeah, thank you. And their website, I had linked to it. Tomorrowswater.org will take you to their website, but it's pljv.org, and that's where all of those resources are. Yeah, thank you all so much.